Between March 2007 to November 2008, the highest level of monthly inflation rate in Zimbabwe was 7.96 into 10 raised to the power 10%. It is not a joke. It was 796,000,000,000,000%. Equivalently, the daily inflation rate was around 98 to 100%. This meant that the prices of the goods was doubling almost every day. A product which was priced at 100 Zimbabwean dollar on day 1 would double to 200 Zimbabwean dollars the very next day. And this is called as hyperinflation. It led to the toppling of the economic system of an entire nation. This is how dangerous inflation can be. Now, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to discuss a very important topic, which is inflation, with all of you. Inflation is something which affects all of us. It affects our income, it affects our expenses, it affects our long term wealth creation. And that is why inflation is something which all of us must understand fully in order to understand how to combat inflation. Hello everyone, welcome to the second video of the free mini economics series that I have been making for you. We have been discussing various economic concepts which all of us must be aware of because these concepts affect our daily life. I already talked about demand and supply in the first part of this series. If you haven't watched the first video, then please do watch it right now because it forms the basis of what I'm going to discuss in today's video. And today we are going to talk about a very, very crucial concept, which is inflation. I'll be talking about what is inflation. I'll be talking about why inflation happens, what are the reasons of inflation. Then I'll be talking about how is it measured. Fourth point I'm going to talk about is how it affects you. This is extremely important and probably the most important part of the video. So stay tuned till the very end. And finally, I'm going to close out this video by discussing a special case study on hyperinflation, how inflation, extreme inflation, led to the economic crumble of an entire nation. Without further ado, let's start this video. Inflation, simply put, is mehengai, or a general price rise in the goods and services that we consume. We all have heard of it, we all see it happening around us, we all understand it intuitively. But let me give you a few examples, a few practical real life examples on how we see inflation happening around us. How many of you have heard of your parents or your grandparents telling you that a plate of idli or a plate of dosa used to cost 50 paisa or maybe 1 rupee when they were young? Now, the same plate is priced at more than 100 rupees if you go to a normal restaurant. This is what is inflation. The prices of the same idli or the same dosa has increased. The raw materials remain the same. The way of cooking remains the same, but the prices have increased. And this is the definition of inflation. Very simple, very intuitive. But why does inflation happen? What are the causes of inflation? Again, if you haven't watched the first part of this series, then you must go and watch that video right now. I discussed demand and supply with you all. Demand and supply form the basis of how price of a particular good is determined. And inflation is again based on the demand and the supply of that good. Now, before we discuss inflation, we need to understand what is a value chain. I already discussed it in the first part of the series. In case you haven't watched it, let me discuss it here again. Value chain simply means the production chain of a particular good. That is, what all stages does a particular good go through while it reaches from the producer to the consumer. So let's take the example of corn. Now let's say there is a farmer who produces corn. Now he becomes the producer. So in order to produce corn, he takes raw materials, he takes seeds, he will take some water, he'll take fertilizers, he'll take pesticides, and so on and so forth. Now, he'll take all these raw materials, he'll produce corn, and then he will sell it to a wholesaler. A wholesaler is someone who deals in bulk quantities. So this wholesaler is going to purchase a large quantity of corn from the farmer. Now this wholesaler is going to sell this corn to different retailers. Retailer 1, retailer 2, retailer 3, and so on and so forth. So these will be the retailers. Now these retailers are going to sell it to different consumers. consumer 1, consumer 2, and consumer 3. So basically, the farmer becomes the producer of the good, the end consumer becomes the consumer. For example, you and I would be the final consumers of this good, and these people, the wholesaler and the retailers, would become the intermediaries who basically ensure that the good reaches from the producer to the final market where the consumer purchases it from. So these are the intermediaries. Now, this is what a production chain or a value chain of a good looks like. Now, where does inflation come in? What causes inflation? Let's say that the prices or the cost of the raw material goes up. So let's say seeds become more expensive, water becomes more expensive, extraction of water becomes more expensive, so price of water increases, and so on and so forth, which means that the raw materials in effect have become more expensive. That means, for example, earlier the farmer was putting in 6 rupees to produce 1 kg of corn and then sold his produce at 10 rupees per kg to the wholesaler. Now the cost has become 7 rupees for him, and therefore he decides to increase his prices and sells it to the wholesaler at 11 rupees per kg. The wholesaler who purchased it at 10 rupees kg, added his profits, was selling it to the retailer at 15 rupees per kg, will now sell it at 16 rupees per kg. The retailer who used to sell the same good to the consumer at 20 rupees per kg would now sell it at 21 rupees per kg. This means that the price of the corn for the end consumer has increased by 1 rupee per kg. And this 1 rupee would be termed as inflation. This is the price rise. Now, 1 rupee may seem to be very less, but if it accumulates over time, it can actually lead to a very high price rise in any good, any service. Now, since this price rise was caused because of an increase in the cost of production, increase in the cost of raw material, this is called as cost push inflation. Basically, the increase in cost pushes the inflation, pushes the prices up. I hope that this was not too technical for you. I tried to simplify it as much as I could. Now, let's move on to the second cause of inflation, which is again very intuitive. Let me again explain it to you with an example. Let's say the end consumers, that is people like you and I who consume corn, were consuming initially 100 kgs of corn in a particular year. Let's say there is a study which comes in and it says that if you have more corn, your life expectancy increases. A lot of us would start consuming more corn. Irrespective of the taste, a lot of us would want to become more healthy and increase our life expectancy, and therefore we would start consuming more corn. Let's say cumulatively, instead of 100 kg per year, we all start demanding 150 kgs of corn per year. We want to have more corn, we want to increase our life expectancy, and therefore we start demanding 150 kg per year. Let's say that the farmer was initially producing 100 kg, which could cater to the initial demand of all of us, but suddenly he's faced with an increased demand. He needs to produce 50 kg extra. Now, where will this 50 kg come from? It is not as if suddenly he can start getting more seeds or start extracting more water. Even getting all the raw materials in place takes time. It's not as if he can start producing 150 kg suddenly. This increase in demand would cause an additional pressure on the farmer to produce more goods. However, till the time that production can happen, it will put extreme pressure on the prices. People like you and I would be willing to pay more in order to get more corn in our hand. So this means that it would put an additional pressure on the price, and the price of corn is going to increase. With me so far? Now, since this increase in price happened because a sudden increase in the demand, it is called as demand pull inflation. Demand pull. Basically, an increase in demand caused the inflation to happen or caused an increase in prices. This is called as demand pull inflation. Now, I very simply explained how does a value chain affect the prices of the goods, what causes prices to rise. It could be because the cost of raw materials has increased, it could be because the demand has increased. So both of these cases would lead to a price rise or inflation in general. Inflation can also happen because of certain economic policies, and this is where you should be very attentive because this is going to affect your income, your decisions about how and where should you invest. So the first reason for inflation could be because of increase in the cost of raw materials. The second reason is because of a sudden increase in the demand of that good. Demand of good rises. Now, the third reason for inflation could be because of government intervention. Now, let me explain it. If you remember, in March 2020, when the pandemic hit India and there was the first lockdown, the spending of the entire economy decreased. People were only spending on essential items. They were not purchasing electronic items. They could not travel outside. They could not consume food outside. They could not buy other services, which meant that the spending overall decreased. A lot of people also lost their jobs, which meant that the unemployment rate increased a lot. And because people lost their jobs, they did not have enough cash in their hand to spend money. This meant that the spending had decreased and the government had to intervene to ensure that people had enough money in their hands to meet their daily needs. So, which led to government taking several measures. For example, they announced certain infrastructure projects. The idea was simple that building any kind of infrastructure requires employment. These infrastructure projects would employ people. If people get employed, they get wages in their hands, they get money in their hands, and that money they can spend on their daily needs and other items that they need to purchase. So, this could have led to employment generation, wage increase, and spending increase. This meant that the demand would have increased. Then they announced certain tax incentives. Now, because the MSME sector was hit hard, the factories were shut down. A lot of startups also suffered. They had to announce certain tax incentives in the form of lowering of tax, in the form of completely foregoing the tax. So, in order to ensure that these MSME sectors can survive through the pandemic. Then they announced certain loan waivers. They even decreased loans so that the loan offtake increases, consumers at an individual level, and the factories and the industry start taking more loans, start producing more in order to ensure that the demand and supply again increases. Now, this is what happened at that time. Now, all these factors led to an increase in demand again. Now, as I told you, when there is an increase in demand, but in case the supply is not able to meet the demand, then a price rise happens or inflation occurs. Now, this is the symbol of inflation. Please don't mind it. It is basically pi. Inflation occurs. Just a quick bonus information point. Anyway, this is basically the third way of how inflation can occur. Government can increase the fiscal expenditure or their expenditure on infrastructure projects. It can waive off loans. It can lower the interest rate in order to boost up the demand, and that can lead to a price rise. The fourth way, and probably the most dangerous way, is through what is called as printing of money. Now, during the pandemic, in order to finance these infrastructure projects, a lot of governments started taking more loans. They started taking more debts, and the world debt overall increased. This meant that the governments had to finance that debt somehow. How could it finance the debt? Either it could take more and more debt in order to finance the first debt. This is called as evergreening of debt. Let's not go into the details there. But the other way is through printing more currency, printing more cash in order to increase the money supply in the economy. So, printing of money is basically increasing the money supply. In the economy. When there is an increase in money supply, when there is more money in our hands, what happens? We start purchasing more and more goods. We have spare money to purchase goods. However, the factories and the industry is not able to cater to our demand. and that means that the price rise. For example, say these people have more cash in their hand. They want to purchase goods. However, the industry produces only one good and it is not able to cater to the extra demand that is being generated. So, this means that the demand is much more than what the supply is. And this again leads to a price rise, or this leads to inflation. A lot of government schemes were announced during the first lockdown. This was important because many wage laborers had lost their jobs, and it was important that they were able to survive or they were able to meet their basic daily needs, and hence putting money into their hands was important. But this also meant that there was a lot of demand generation which could not be met with the supply, and hence inflation started occurring again. This is usually considered to be the least effective way of tackling any crisis because people are effectively getting free money. There is no return that is being generated, and hence this is probably one of the most dangerous forms of inflation. Now let me explain how is inflation measured. I'm going to be very brief about it because this is very, very basic. So you saw the value chain. So there is usually a producer, then a wholesaler, then a retailer, or many retailers for that matter, and then finally there are the final consumers, people like you and I. Now, inflation is measured at this stage, the wholesaler stage. It is called as Wholesale Price Index, WPI. And then it is measured at the consumer stage where it is called as Consumer Price Index. The difference is basically this, that wholesale price index usually takes a basket of goods that we usually consume in our everyday life. These would be the food that we consume, the crops that we consume, cereals that we consume, and so on and so forth. And it would assign a certain weight to each of these goods. Now you can see the table here. This will give you a better explanation of what all goods are included in the wholesale price index. And this, the change in price from one year to the next, is called as inflation. For example, say in year 1, the price of this basket of goods was 100 rupees. Now it has increased to 105. So the inflation rate is basically 105 minus 100 divided by 100, which is equal to 5%. Similarly, consumer price index, it includes a basket of goods and services. Now here, services are also included. Services such as education, such as healthcare facilities, these are also included because as final consumers, we tend to consume a lot more services as well besides the normal food consumption that we have. So these would be also included. Now again, the definition remains the same. Change in prices from the previous year is called as inflation. Very simple, to the point, and very brief. Now let's move on to the next topic and the most critical topic of this particular video. I know this video is a little long, but please bear with me because this is very, very important for you to understand. So we are going to discuss how does inflation affect you. It affects your income, it affects your expenses, it affects your long-term wealth creation. So I'm going to explain it in a simple way. Let's say you have rupees 100 to spend. So you buy something healthy for yourself. So you buy 5 apples. So basically, each apple, please pardon the drawing, but each apple costs you rupees 20. One apple costs you rupees 20. Now, let's say that there is inflation because of the several factors that we discussed, and suddenly the prices of each apple goes to rupees 40. Right? So the price of goods has increased because of inflation, prices of apples or goods increases because of inflation, and each apple now costs rupees 40. And you still have this 100 rupee note with you. So how many apples would you be able to buy with this 100 rupees? You'll be able to buy only 2.5 apples. This means that earlier if you could consume X amount, now the prices have doubled and now you can only consume X by 2 amount. With me so far? This means that the value of that 100 rupees has decreased. Now 100 rupees cannot purchase the same amount of goods as it could earlier. The value of your currency has decreased. And this is what inflation is all about. It eats into your money. And that is why you should be very, very wary of where you're investing, of how you're growing money. Because if inflation happens, it will keep on eating into your money, and the value of the amount of money you hold will keep on decreasing. If you're holding only cash, then a few years down the line, that cash will not be worth anything. If the cash is not growing, then your money will keep on decreasing. So for example, you have 100 rupees, you decide to put it in your savings account, which gives you rupees 103 a year from now. However, if the inflation rate is 5%, then effectively, if you're earning 3 rupees from your savings balance, subtract 5 rupees from here, and then effectively you will be left only with rupees 98 by the end of 1 year. This means you have actually lost your money rather than earning that savings rate. Similarly, if you put your money in an FD and you have 100 rupees, you put your money in FD, and the FD promises you 6% over a period of say 1 or 2 years, but the inflation rate is 5%, then you subtract this 5% from here, and the effective or the real interest rate you will get is only 1%. So the formula is basically that the real interest rate is equal to the interest rate you're getting on the asset, interest rate on the asset minus the inflation rate. This is the formula, or this is the equation that you must keep in mind always. This is what will help you decide where to invest. So for example, if you're investing in a savings account, the real interest rate that you actually get in your hand could be negative. You might already be losing money. If you invest in an FD, the real interest rate could be very, very minute or very minuscule. So you must decide where to invest. You have other options as well. You must explore all those options to grow your money. Now, finally, I discussed the case of Zimbabwe, in which extreme inflation, also called as hyperinflation, nearly toppled an economy. So, this is how the story went. In the late 1990s, the Zimbabwean government introduced a slew of economic reforms. They started with land reforms. They started evicting the white farmers in order to provide employment to the native black farmers. However, the native black farmers did not know anything about agriculture. They did not know how to do farming, and hence the farming output started decreasing, which meant that there was an acute food shortage. It also meant that consumers or the demand was not being met and the supply had fallen. This meant that the prices started rising. Then simultaneously, there was also a war going on with Congo, and the wars have to be financed. There was money to be provided. So, in order to provide a short term solution to these problems, the Zimbabwean government, started printing more money, which meant that the money supply increased. There was more money in the hands of people, but there was not enough goods in the economy. And hence, more money was chasing very few goods, and this led to inflation, which kept on increases and led to a situation of hyperinflation, wherein the highest inflation rate touched 7.96 into 10 raised to power 10%. That is, prices of goods were doubling almost every day. So much so that the inflation spiraled out of control and the government had to completely abandon its currency. Its currency had lost all its meaning. The value of Zimbabwean dollar was nothing. Finally, Zimbabwean dollar had to adopt US dollars as its new currency, and this is how it continues so far. The bottom line is, inflation is a very, very tricky concept. It can be very, very devastating for any economy. We must be wary of what the inflation rate is. Usually, an inflation rate of 2 to 3% is considered to be decent. However, anything beyond 5 to 7% is considered to be a little dangerous. So, this is how inflation affects all of us. I hope you learned a very important lesson here, that we must know how to grow our money, how to keep our investments diversified, because inflation eats into our money and the value of currency decreases because of inflation. I hope you found this video to be useful. It was a little long, but it was very important. Please do like the video if you found the information to be useful. Please do subscribe to the channel because I plan to post more content around economics, finance, and public policy. I'll also be doing a few case studies later on. So please do subscribe. I'll see you the next time. Till then, take care, stay safe. Bye.